Well, Cape Town City Ballet is celebrating 90 years with a grand gala as well as a winter dances celebration. And here I've got the artistic producer, David Nixon, and joining him are two amazing dancers, Fumi Kaneko from Osaka in Japan and from Chelyabinsk in Russia, Vadim Muntagirov. David, Fumi, Vadim, welcome and thank you very much for your time.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Let's talk about 90 years, David. I mean, it is one of the oldest ballet companies in the world. And for it to happen in this beautiful city of Cape Town, in the southernmost tip of Africa, that's a wonderful achievement, isn't it?
I think it's quite extraordinary. And I think that since I've been here on board since January, I've been quite taken aback that the ballet world has not noted this. And this idea that a company was formed here 90 years ago by Dulcie House, and what I think is most important was her vision. And this was about equality of gender and ethnicity. And to think that that happened in 1934, she was so ahead of her time. And this is something that we're trying to still put in place in companies today, you know, in 2024. So I think it's remarkable. And, you know, the company's gone through quite an extraordinary history. It started off in the university, and then it expanded from there. And it had kind of what you might refer to a golden period where it was heavily funded by the government. And then, of course, thank God, with the end of apartheid, the company went into a new phase where the government funding was totally changed, and then has had to sort of reinvent itself, I think, a lot. And I think it's still in that process. But it's 90, and I think everyone needs to be proud of that. And especially in Cape Town, they need to realize that this institution goes beyond all the politics and is something quite extraordinary to have.
You've opened the door, so let's walk through it. The performing arts, I think, an essential part of any metropolitan city. And if you're going to be a global city like Cape Town is, you have to have a ballet company, you have to have a philharmonic orchestra, you have to have an opera company, as well as the other performing arts, contemporary dance and all those kind of things. But in a country that is challenged in the way that South Africa is, how do we make a case for a city ballet company?
You opened the door. I opened the door. Who opened this door? It's always a difficult question, and I don't think it's singular to a country like South Africa. We always come up against this wherever we are. That, you know, should you fund education or hospitals or the homeless versus the arts? And I think it's something you just can't compare it. They serve different purposes. And, you know, one is survival, you can say, but the other is a form of survival as humans, because we need that creative element in our world. Without that, we aren't anything. And I think that, you know, it's what shapes who and what we are. You think of what you're wearing, what we're all wearing in the room today. Without creativity, we would all be in I don't know what, whatever we picked up off the street. And I think that, you know, it's a hard argument, but when people go to the theater, they can escape from a lot of issues that they have in their lives. And I have been touched many times by letters from people, for instance, who live in difficult circumstances, but somehow have been given a ticket or have managed to buy a ticket and have come to the theater and have written me about what that 2 hours did for them in their lives, that they were allowed to step away into something that is either beautiful or moving, transforming them from their daily life. And so they went back to it more empowered.
And I suppose an additional argument for me would be, firstly, the artists who are on stage, you're giving them job opportunities, and we often forget the army of people it takes to actually mount a production. The costumers, the dressers, the wig makers, the carpenters, the painters, all of those people down the value chain who perhaps never get to enjoy a bow on opening night, but actually have contributed to the success of that particular production.
I mean, you're absolutely right, Africa. The economic impact is huge. One of the big things about theater in the UK is what it brings to the economy. Because you're not only talking about all those people you're employing to do it, you're also talking about the restaurants that are sitting beside the theaters, the people that are employed by them. You're talking about clothing. People dress up to go to the theater. Parking lots. It extends beyond. And then, of course, you know, it's like an ambassador of the country. So, for instance, right now there are many South African artists out there on the international stage, and they are selling South Africa as something extraordinary. And that's important to the country as well, because that brings an attention to everything in the country. People were more aware, I think, of the elections this time than I've ever think they have been outside.
That is true. Now, it's 90 years. How, in heaven's name, do you decide this is what I'm going to program to mark the 90th anniversary of the founding of this wonderful company?
You come up with difficult questions. My goodness, I needed to research and study before I came to talk to you. No one warned me about this. First of all, I came on very late. There were transitions in the company recently in the management that have created kind of, I would say, a little bit of a bump over the last couple of years, and that is unfortunate. But let's put it on the table. It happens everywhere, and it's part of the arts. It's part of any sort of business in its history. But I came on in about January and quickly had to decide what we might do for the season. And I believe you came to my first element of the 90th season, the Gershwin program. So the Gershwin program was about celebration and celebrating the cultural landscape of Cape Town, which I think is extraordinary. So I brought together the Philharmonic on stage with singers from the opera. Jazz Arts was with us as well. And I think that sort of was a statement about the company is larger than Cape Town City Ballet. It infiltrates the entire network of the artistic community that's here, and also on the beautiful stage at the Artscape Theatre in the Opera House. There was always going to be a gala element. You can't have a birthday without one night that's the really big party. And because it was short notice, I took a different theme for the gala, which is really about celebrating 90 years in dance. So, of course, we have these two extraordinary dancers from the Royal Ballet with us, but we also have dancers from Birmingham Royal Ballet, from Northern Ballet, from the Czech National Ballet, and from Joburg Ballet, who've come together with the Cape Town City Ballet artists to do a celebration. And I'm really pleased because one of the elements of Winter Dances, which is Kenneth Tyndall's new work, Shades of You, was so moving and powerful when I came back to see it in the studio that I have decided to premiere it on the gala evening. So it's going to not just have these amazing dancers, but you're also going to see Cape Town City Ballet and what I think is maybe an identity going forward, and a beautiful mix of European ideas, but also with South African dancers, and I think that's great. And then Winter Dances was already sort of in progress. Kenneth Tyndall's work had been commissioned by Debbie Turner quite a few years ago, pre-COVID, I think. So it's kind of a legacy from COVID. And so putting that program together has been exciting for myself and Tracy Lee. I brought two dancers / choreographers. One of them is a Cape Townian, Malindi Kulashe, and he's presenting a work he did during COVID for men, and Mariana Rodriguez is presenting a work she did for women. And then I kind of got roped into creating a new work for the company. So you get an old choreographer on this program, very classical, and then it goes through younger generations, and of course Kenneth Tyndall, who is quite a star today in the international world.
Absolutely. The evening of the 90th anniversary gala is on the 24th of August. It's a Saturday. It starts at 5 p.m. and then winter dances start on the 29th of August through the 1st of September. You can go to Artscape for more details. Actually, rather go to capetowncityballet.org.za. Let's bring in the dancers now. Fumi and Vadim are both from the Royal Ballet Company. But Fumi, you're from Osaka. You're from Japan. And I imagine in Japan there is quite an investment in dance, in ballet. What brought you to the dance form? What made you go, that's what I want to do one day?
I started ballet when I was 3 years old.
3 years old?
Yes.
Heavens.
My mom, because she wanted to dance when she was younger and she couldn't do it. So when she had babies, she wanted her children to do. So that's why my sister and I went to ballet studio and then started. But when I started to feel like I want to dance, it was around like 12 years old.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, we're very grateful to your mom for introducing you to ballet. This is your third visit to Cape Town. What keeps on bringing you back?
Well, Vadim took me here for first time, and I just fell in love with the nature here. It's so beautiful, I think. And the audience here, I feel the love from the audience, and they appreciate what we do on stage, and that makes me really excited to come here again. And yes, every time it's my highlight of the year.
Oh, fantastic. It's the one thing we absolutely have over any audiences in Europe and perhaps parts of America as well. We are a very generous audience. We will tell you in the middle of the dance that we actually like what you're doing. Whereas generally in Europe, people wait until the end of the performance and then will leap up to their feet and all that, which is incredible. Well, Vadim, you've been here 10 times. Yes. Do you have property in Cape Town already?
No, I don't, but I'm always so happy to be here. And last time when I was here on the first day in the studio, after the rehearsal, all the ballet staffs were looking for me. And after the rehearsal, I was already on top of the Table Mountain, taking selfies and just exploring things. So it's every time I'm here, it's such a wonderful time. And to see familiar faces in the company with the dancers, and also experiencing new choreography, because I've done quite a lot of work by Veronica Paper, and her choreography is very challenging. And actually in the Gala we're gonna perform Romeo and Juliet, Balcony Pas de Deux, choreographed by her. And it's absolutely wonderful pas de deux, and we really enjoy performing together. So I hope audience will see our love in this short amount of time.
Let's talk about that actually for a minute. Veronica, of course, is an icon in Cape Town in South Africa, and many would argue the world, right? Romeo and Juliet is a classical story. We all know what is supposed to happen. What happens in the choreography that makes hers stand out from any other Romeo and Juliet you might have danced before?
Well, for me personally, I feel young when I perform her choreography. So there is some other Romeo and Juliet choreography where I feel a little bit more mature, but when I perform Veronica's work, I feel like I'm 16 years old. So it's the steps she used, they are very challenging, but it kind of makes sense. It feels like that's what young silly boy would do, being in love, throwing the girl around and then just running around, spinning around, having fun. So that's kind of a highlight for me.
We do forget that Romeo was a child, actually.
Yes.
Because often the characters portrayed, certainly when it comes to the play, by people obviously who are quite a bit older than 16. But he was a child, and he did behave like a child, didn't he?
Yes.
David, that's the advantage you have. People like Veronica and many other choreographers actually have trained and have developed dancers in Cape Town. So you've got a wealth of experience and history and legacy to work off, right?
Of course. I think maybe I should be dancing that Romeo pas de deux if it makes you feel young again. I'm not sure I can get quite down to 16 though, but
That's amazing. Let's talk about the work you introducing. What is the process you undertake in conceiving a piece and choreographing a piece?
So I don't often really think of myself as a choreographer. Choreography came to me because of how I wanted to train my dancers as a director. So creating is always a means of what I want the company to develop as artists. It can be either in the interpretive area, it can be in the quality of execution, technical side, whatever. So I always am looking at that. where's the company at? What would I like them to do? What is the next step for them? The other thing for me is costume design. So I can't, especially if I do a full-length evening, I'll give you an example of doing The Great Gatsby. I can't go into the studio till I know what the dancers are wearing, because the wearing for me of the costumes dictates their movement. So, for instance, you have three main female characters in Gatsby in my production. They are Myrtle, Jordan, and Daisy.
Yeah.
And each of them has a very specific design from the 20s. And, for instance, Daisy's in Chanel-inspired outfits, which makes her more delicate, much more like a flower. Jordan wears a lot of silk trouser suits. So she has this cross between being quite athletic and even crosses the line sometimes in her movements as being manly in a way. She has that ability to be a little bit more what we call today fluid.
Yeah.
And then Myrtle is in very bright colors, and her interpretation of what she thinks the latest fashion is, because she's a dreamer. She wants to be something more than herself. And once I have the costumes, I can see the steps.
The Great Gatsby was my set work in matric, so I know the novel very, very well and the characters you're speaking of. But forgive the naivety in the question. Don't you dictate to the costume designer that this is what I'm looking for?
I'm usually the costume designer on my productions.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't tend to work with a costume designer because I found early on when I was a dancer that I would get into a fitting for a costume and I'd look at it and I'd look at the designer and I'd say, do you know what I'm doing in this ballet? And most of the time I'd say, well, no, not really. And I'd say, well, actually, my movement and this costume are not going to go together. So we're going to have to rethink that. And I think also my first productions, I had no money whatsoever. So I couldn't hire a designer. And so I looked into designing the costumes myself and buying the fabric. Fabric's very important to me because it also tells you how it's going to move.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I always work with set designers because that's beyond me, but the costumes usually lie in my hands.
For me, I imagine the costume that you're wearing does make a difference, right? In your ability to move and to showcase whatever the choreography that has been created for you.
Yes, I think for us it's a big part of it. Sometimes we rehearse so much in the studio in our practice clothes, and as soon as wear costume, I can't do anything.
Wow.
I can't lift leg. I can't turn. Sometimes I step on the costume and then rip it off. And so it's yes, to wear something comfortable for dancers, it's a dream. And some ballet, it is like that, and sometimes it's very challenging.
How soon should the costumes be brought into the rehearsal room? Because I imagine you're wearing tights and leggings and all that kind of thing that is just like, very comfortable. How I mean, the earlier I imagine, the better, right? So that you can get used to the costume itself.
Yes. Yes, if we can rehearse in it as much as possible, that'll be great. But sometimes in our company, we can't make it old or sweat too much, so it's restricting.
I can imagine, yeah, because
The
those costumes
wardrobe
are
can be
expensive.
quite possessive with their costumes.
Yeah. In fact, aren't costumes part of the assets that any dance company would have, right?
Absolutely.
Because even with Veronica's work, for example, she's able to go back to some of the costumes designed in the 90s, in the noughties, and haul it out again, freshen it up, and then be able to get the dancers to wear it again.
Absolutely.
Vadim, us men are, I don't want to say poorly costumed, because that is not true, right? Because the tops can be great and amazing, but the bottoms are very simple, aren't they? Or have you had to wear slightly challenging costuming in past dances before?
Yes, I've been wearing all sort of different costumes, and usually in the ballet world, when you wear ballet tights, it's you can't really hide your potential, or your physique. So you have to stretch your knee, you have to stretch your feet. But there is some costumes where you wear quite a baggy trousers, where sometimes you could bend your knee, and your choreographer or your director don't see that. So usually, like for example, when you do very classical piece like Sleeping Beauty,
Yeah.
you wear white tights, and you can't hide anywhere. It's you expose, and you have to show pure classical technique.
Are you
which
in the
is-
Sleeping Beauty on
yes,
Saturday?
yes, exactly. So we kind of showing two different things, because Sleeping Beauty is probably one of the most iconic classical ballets where
Yeah.
there is no room for error. You just have to make everything work, and you have to show that it's absolutely effortless, which is not. We
Yeah.
actually, before we came here, all three of us, we ran the Sleeping Beauty pas de deux very quickly, and it was quite a challenging 10 minutes.
I
We,
can imagine.
Yeah.
And for me, how do you as a ballerina deal with the pressure that comes with dancing an iconic piece like that people have seen time and time and time and time again, and will be looking for, that movement perhaps that is not quite as smooth or not quite as does that sort of keep in your mind, or do you just trust, what, we've rehearsed it, we've worked, and now come on, let's have fun on stage?
Yes, for us dancers, I think pressure is one of the most challenging things to deal with. And for me, it's all about how much I rehearse, how much I prepare for it, and then I can enjoy on stage. So I can trust myself to be free on stage, let it go with the beautiful music on stage. But behind that, we always have this studio time, which probably no one can imagine how much we work in the studio. And
how important is a relationship where you trust him,
yes,
and he trusts you? I mean, that's important, right? It's not just a case of, you both being paid to come and dance or dance. You actually have to have a relationship, don't you?
yes, we talk, we rehearse a lot, and the chemistry as well. It has to match and make one thing very special. We can't be two different dancers dancing on stage, but we have to make one thing together.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And not just the costuming, but the choreography is always favored in the bias of the ballerina, right? And as the gentleman, you almost have to find your moments where you own that stage. Are you gonna find moments where you own that stage this weekend?
Yes, yeah. It's actually it's a lot of work behind the actual performance, because as Fumi and David said, it's when we rehearse in a studio where we feel quite comfortable, we're wearing practice clothes, but then when it comes to the performance time, we have to put costumes, sometimes brand new costumes, which are impossible to move in. And then, of course, it's theater lightings, which also put you off quite a lot when you have a very bright spotlight. And sometimes my parents would ask me, was the theater full? Was there many people? And I would tell them I didn't see anyone, because the spotlights are so strong that it's a blackout. And of course, there is a conductor, which sometimes maybe they play too fast or too slow, and you have to get on with it. And when you rehearse with your partner as well, you're not just a partner, a dancer, you in a way a psychologist as well, because you have to help each other, you have to get on together. You can't just come in a studio and then do the steps. You have to get on, you have to ask the person how she or how is he, how they feel, and then you develop that ballet partnership, and it helps so much to perform the more you know each other.
David, I want to sort of focus a bit on the conductor, because Vadim makes a very good point. It's bizarre to think that there are conductors who specialize in conducting ballets, because there has to be that, let me see what the dancers are doing, and if I need to slow the orchestra down just a tad in order for them to catch up, you do that. And if you can see that they're energetic and they can do with a bit of speeding up, there is that kind of freedom to the conductor if you have the right conductor. And tell us about who's going to be conducting for the gala.
So for the gala, I invited Daniel Parkinson, who I know very well from my days at Northern Ballet, because I needed somebody not only who was familiar with this kind of evening, because we only have one rehearsal with the orchestra on stage before we perform, and that's very tight. And also somebody who's familiar with the different rep and who could help me get the music put together. And he's very good at all of that. The conductor has I always think, a very difficult life, because first of all, orchestras do not like being in the pit. Even though we try to express to them how important they are to us.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons I put them on stage in the Gershwin program. Correct, because I want to prove to them that we do think of them respectfully and they are our equals, but it's just the visual to see the dancers. We have to put them somewhere else, but they're extremely important to us. My wife would always say that, without the music, she couldn't do a step, and it's true. And also we use these terms faster or slower, and in actual fact, it's the feeling in the music. If the conductor has the right sense of space in the music, we can deal with it. If they're dry about it and keep to a metronome, it gets more difficult. Part of the problem is that musicians, their faster and slower is a bigger feel.
Yeah.
For dancers, it's very small. And it feels like nothing to a musician when you say we need a little faster. Basically, I tell them just breathe a bit. And then for slower is breathe a bit. For faster, it's just think a little bit like you've had a coffee, and then it'll go. But it's a real marriage, and sometimes the relationship goes beautifully, and as you know, sometimes there are a few bumps in it. And but unfortunately, the dancer is the one that has to always deal with it, because they're up there doing it.
Yeah.
They can have a few words afterwards, but at the moment they got to perform.
That's true. Now, at the time of recording, I imagine there are some seats and tickets available for the gala this weekend?
There are, at this moment, about 30.
Oh, wow. So the sooner you go to Town City Ballet, .org.za.
But we have lots of seats available for winter dances.
Oh, stunning.
Where you'll be able to see Kenneth's fantastic new work. And you'll also, at the evening performances, be able to see these two extraordinary dancers perform Vadim's new choreography.
Ah, fantastic. What are you choreographing, Vadim?
So it will be a vision pas de deux from Sleeping Beauty. So it's my first ever step towards choreography, and I'm very happy that I will experience my first work here in Cape Town. I'm looking forward. It's I hope it's a first step to a big future. Yes, because I know it sounds funny, but being 34 years old, I'm not that young in the ballet world. So, of course, sometimes there is...
By the way, there are listeners listening going, oh, he's such a child.
Yes. And, me going home and thinking, okay, I'm 34. It's time to maybe explore something more. Or actually, sometimes I perform something and I go home and I feel like I want to do something I want to do as well, because I've done this for so many years. But we'll see. It's very classical. So it's with Fumi together, and she's been amazing. She listened to me, so I'm very lucky.
Well, I cannot wait to see it. Gives me 2 excuses to go to the ballet this coming week. What a treat, celebrating Town City Ballet's 90 years at Grand Gala this coming Saturday, and of course a winter dance celebration that starts on the 29th of August. David, Fumi and Vadim, thank you so much for making time. Go back to the rehearsal room now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, guys.